A little girl knocks on the millionaire's door. What she says leaves him shocked. Mom just died. The wind that swept through the hills of Denver that morning was sharp and insistent, dragging with it the scent of pine and the first whispers of autumn. Atop a steep, winding road, hidden behind wrought iron gates and dense cedar trees, stood a modern fortress of glass and stone. The house had clean lines, wide windows, and silence pressing against every corner. No one had entered that gate in years, no visitor, no friend, no family. And certainly, no child. Henry Whittaker sat alone in his library, the soft crackle of the fireplace competing only with the scratch of his pen against yellowed paper. The room smelled of old books and lemon oil. Floor-to-ceiling shelves loomed around him like patient observers, filled with dusty hardbacks whose spines had not been touched in decades. He didn't look up as the wind howled louder outside or when a tree branch brushed against the roof tiles like fingers scraping a chalkboard. He was used to it, the isolation, the sound of weather instead of voices, the quiet ache of routine. He hadn't always been this way. There was a time, long ago, when the Whittaker name made headlines in financial circles, when Henry was the man everyone wanted to sit beside at charity galas and boardroom tables. That man, sharp-suited and magnetic, had vanished almost 20 years ago, replaced by this version, solitary, gray at the temples, and thoroughly uninterested in the outside world. At 58, Henry had everything money could buy. And yet he lived as though the world had ended just for him, and the only thing left to do was survive the silence. He cooked his own meals, answered no calls, and spoke only to the few delivery men permitted to drop packages at the gate. The security system, upgraded every 2 years, kept the world out, and Henry in. On this particular morning, he was reviewing old estate documents, something triggered by a dream he couldn't quite remember but that left him uneasy. Names he hadn't spoken aloud in years danced across the papers. Sarah Miller, a memory like a distant tremor. He paused, glasses slipping down his nose, and leaned back in the leather chair, trying to summon her face. It had been too long. Then came the knock. Soft. 3 times. As if the person knocking was unsure the door would even open. He froze. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't a delivery. No one ever came to the door. He stood slowly, legs stiff from hours in the chair, and walked down the corridor that led to the grand entrance. His bare feet made no sound against the polished wood floors. The security camera feed hadn't beeped. That was odd. Every inch of the exterior was wired. Every approach documented. Still, the knock had been real. He reached the door, hand hovering near the bronze handle, and paused. Through the frosted glass, he saw a small silhouette, low to the ground. A child? Henry opened the door slowly. There she stood. A little girl, no more than 7, maybe 8. Thin. Shivering slightly in an oversized gray sweatshirt, sleeves hiding her hands. Her brown hair was messy, tangled into uneven strands, and her cheeks were red from the cold. But her eyes, wide, green, strangely calm, locked onto his. "You're Henry Whittaker, right?" she asked. Her voice didn't tremble. Henry didn't speak. He couldn't. His mouth opened, then closed again. She took one step closer. "My mom just died." And then, just like that, she collapsed. Henry caught her instinctively, arms wrapping around a weight far lighter than it should have been. She was like a bird, too fragile, too quiet. Her breath was warm against his chest, and he realized with alarm that she wasn't unconscious, just exhausted. He stood there for several seconds, the open door letting in a rush of wind. The autumn chill prickled the back of his neck, but he didn't move until he realized her fingers had curled slightly into the fabric of his sweater. A surge of something unfamiliar and uncomfortable rose in his throat. Panic? Guilt? He didn't know. Henry carried her inside. The last time he had held anyone was over 15 years ago, an awkward, obligatory hug from a nephew he hadn't seen since. He laid the girl gently on the long sofa in the living room, pulling a throw blanket over her small form. The fireplace crackled. The house remained eerily quiet. He stood back, arms folded tightly across his chest. She had come to him. This wasn't a coincidence. She had spoken his name. Who was she? The thought struck him like a stone. Had Sarah? No. It couldn't be. But that name. That look in the girl's eyes. That calm, too adult voice. Something about it gnawed at his memory. He returned to the front door and shut it slowly. The lock clicked back into place, a sound that had once brought him comfort. Now, it sounded final in a way he didn't like. He walked back to the girl, knelt beside her. Her breathing was even, her face peaceful now. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. He didn't know what he was supposed to do. Call the police? Call an ambulance? Would they take her away? And why had she come to him? The words repeated in his head like an echo trapped in a canyon. You're Henry Whittaker, right? Yes, he was. And for the first time in years, he wished he wasn't. He sat down across from her, the silence of the house now filled with a presence that changed everything. Henry Whittaker had not opened his door in years. But today, a little girl had knocked. And now, nothing would be the same. She didn't wake for hours. Henry sat near the sofa without speaking, the fire dimming to glowing embers as shadows crawled across the high walls of his living room. The girl had barely moved since he laid her down, only the steady rise and fall of her chest assuring him she was still alive. Her cheeks were no longer red from the cold but pale, and every so often, her lips twitched as if she were dreaming. Henry had made 2 full circuits around the room, checked the security system 3 times, and stood more than once with the house phone in hand, ready to call someone. But who? Emergency services? The police? And what would he say? A strange girl showed up claiming her mother had just died and then passed out on his front step? It sounded insane, and it was insane. But it had happened. What was more insane, however, was that he hadn't already thrown the situation into someone else's hands. That's what he would have done a few years ago. Push it off. Shut the door. Not his responsibility. But something about the girl's eyes, something unspoken and unsettling, had tangled itself into the cracks of his solitude. When she finally stirred, the room had gone nearly dark except for the soft orange flicker of the fire. She blinked slowly, then sat up with effort, the blanket sliding off her lap. Her fingers gripped the edge of the couch like she wasn't sure if the ground beneath her was steady. You're awake, Henry said. It came out flatter than he'd meant, not unfriendly, just unused to speaking aloud. The girl nodded slowly, brushing hair from her face. I thought I dreamed this, she whispered. Do you know where you are? She looked around, and for the first time, Henry saw uncertainty in her face. A house. A big one. Then she turned her gaze back to him. You're Henry Whittaker. I wasn't wrong. Henry sat forward slightly. Yes. That's me. Who are you? Lily, she said. Lily Miller. The name hit him like a quiet thud. He didn't flinch, but his hands clenched slightly on his knees. You said your mother, she died. This morning. She didn't wake up. I tried to shake her, but she was cold. Lily's voice remained eerily calm, though her eyes darkened with the weight of her words. She always said if anything happened, I should find you. Henry stared at her, unable to form a response. There was no tremble in her voice, no crying. It disturbed him, how composed she was. Do you know how to contact your father? He asked carefully. She shook her head. Never met him. She said he left before I was born. That he wasn't important. And you walked here alone? She hesitated. I took the bus. I had a little money saved. It took a long time. I had to ask people which way was Denver. I had the address. Henry frowned. You had this address? She nodded and pulled something from the front pocket of her hoodie, a crumpled piece of paper, smoothed at the edges from being unfolded too many times. She handed it to him. His name was written in delicate, slanted cursive. Below it, the full address of the house. It was his handwriting on the back that gave him pause, an old note scribbled decades ago, back when he still wrote letters by hand. He hadn't seen it in years. "Where did you get this?" he asked, voice tightening. "My mom kept it in a box. With some pictures. And a letter she wrote but never sent. She said if I ever had to go to someone, it should be you. That you used to be someone good." Henry swallowed hard. The fire cracked behind him, louder than before. "She told you that?" "Yeah." He sat back in his chair. His heart thudded slowly, like a metronome running just off beat. "How long were you alone?" Lily looked down. "Since yesterday afternoon. I stayed until it got dark. I didn't know what to do." She looked like she was sleeping. "But I knew." "And you didn't call anyone?" "I tried. I called 911 on her phone. But nothing happened. No one came. I waited a long time." Henry felt his pulse shift, his stomach twisting with an unfamiliar anxiety. It was impossible. Could someone have ignored her call? Could a child be left behind like this? He stood abruptly, crossed the room, and picked up his own phone. "I need to report this. We need to find out what happened to your mother." Lily's voice came soft but sharp. "They'll take me away." He turned. "What?" She looked up at him, eyes suddenly wild, no longer calm. "They'll take me. They'll put me in a place." That's what she said. "If anything happened, I'd go into the system." She was scared of it. "Lily," he said, his voice trying for steadiness, "there are people who are supposed to help." She didn't trust them. She said they don't care. That once you go in, you disappear. Her voice broke now, the first crack of emotion slipping through. "She said you were the only one she ever trusted." Henry paused, the phone heavy in his hand. "Please," Lily whispered. "Don't call yet. Not until we figure it out. Not until I tell you everything." He looked at her, this small girl sitting in a room too large for her, and felt something shift in his chest, a tug that had nothing to do with guilt or obligation. He set the phone down. "All right," he said. "For now." Relief washed over her face so quickly, it hurt to see. She nodded, curling her knees to her chest, and for a moment, she simply sat there, holding the blanket tight around her shoulders. Henry moved to the kitchen, opening the fridge without knowing what he was looking for. He wasn't used to feeding anyone but himself. After a moment, he pulled out a container of leftover soup, reheated it, and brought it to her. She didn't ask what it was. She ate slowly, carefully, every movement deliberate. He watched from across the room, unsure of how to fill the silence. "Did you know her?" Lily asked eventually. "My mom?" Henry looked down at the envelope she'd given him, Sarah's name still visible in soft ink. He nodded once. "A long time ago." "Did you love her?" The question stunned him. He blinked slowly. "I don't know. We were very young. Life was different then. She always said you were the one who got away." Henry didn't answer. Lily finished the soup. "I'm tired," she murmured. "Can I sleep again?" He nodded, stood, and led her down the hall to one of the guest rooms, one that hadn't been used in nearly a decade. He opened the curtain slightly, turned on the lamp, and adjusted the sheets while she stood quietly at the doorway. "I'll be right down the hall," he said. "If you need anything." She walked over, climbed onto the bed without hesitation, and pulled the covers to her chin. She looked even smaller in the large bed, a child lost in the folds of fabric and memory. "Good night, Mr. Whitaker." He turned back toward the door. "Good night, Lily." He left the door slightly open. Down the hall, back in the library, he poured himself a glass of whiskey. It burned down his throat, but it didn't warm him. She was here. In his house. Sarah's daughter. Maybe. He looked at the envelope again. Whatever the truth was, it had just walked through his front door, and it wasn't going to walk back out. The next morning broke with a soft gray light filtering through the mountain mist. The clouds hung low over Denver's distant skyline, veiling the day in a kind of solemn hush. Henry had not slept. After pacing the halls for most of the night, he had ended up in the attic, digging through boxes untouched for decades. He wasn't entirely sure what he had been looking for, perhaps something to disprove this sudden interruption of his carefully barricaded life. But instead of answers, he found memories he had long decided not to remember. The guest room door creaked open around 8 o'clock in the morning. Henry looked up from the kitchen table where he sat, black coffee cooling untouched in front of him. Lily emerged quietly, her hair tangled, her sleeves pulled down over her hands again. Her eyes met his, and without saying a word, she walked to the table and sat across from him. He pushed a bowl of cereal toward her, the best he could offer without turning this into something that felt permanent. "Thanks," she mumbled, reaching for the spoon. They sat in silence while she ate, the only sound the soft clinking of metal against ceramic. Henry studied her, noting the details now under better light, the subtle way she tilted her head when thinking, the small scar near her left eyebrow, and the way her eyes flicked up to check his expression when she thought he wasn't paying attention. He decided not to press her with more questions. Not yet. After breakfast, she wandered into the living room while he cleaned up. When he joined her minutes later, she was curled on the couch again, this time flipping through a book far too advanced for her age, a volume on American architecture. Her eyes scanned the page like she was trying to understand, not just look. He watched her from the doorway for a moment, then finally spoke. "Where's the letter?" She glanced up. "The one she wrote you?" "Yes. The one she never sent." Lily reached into her sweatshirt pocket and pulled out a folded, worn envelope, edges soft from time. She held it out to him carefully. It was always in the box under her bed. She said she wrote it a long time ago but was too afraid to send it. He took the envelope and sat down heavily in the leather chair. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. The handwriting was unmistakably Sarah's, delicate loops and lines he had once traced on his own skin during nights when the world had seemed too cruel. The letter was dated almost 8 years ago. He read it in silence. "Henry. If you're reading this, it means I've either gotten brave or run out of time. Maybe both. I don't expect you to forgive me for disappearing the way I did. I never stopped thinking about you, even when I hated myself for doing so. Life didn't turn out the way either of us planned. I want to tell you about Lily. She's not your daughter by blood. I'll say that now so you don't read this thinking I'm trying to trap you or guilt you. But she is mine. And she's everything good in me. I adopted her when she was just a baby. Her birth mother was a girl I mentored through a volunteer program. She couldn't keep the child, and the system was already circling. I didn't hesitate. I couldn't. And from the moment I held her, I knew she was mine. But things haven't been easy. I've been sick on and off. The work I do barely covers our rent. And I don't have anyone. Not really. Except you. Even though you were part of a life I buried, I always remembered the version of you that wanted to build, not destroy. I don't know if that man still exists. But if he does, and if I'm ever gone, maybe she can find him. I never meant to come back into your life. I just wanted to believe there was someone in the world I could trust her with. Sarah." Henry lowered the letter slowly, eyes glazed. The room felt smaller, the air too thick. Lily had not moved from the couch. "She said I wasn't hers," Lily said suddenly. "Not by blood. But she said I was hers in every other way. I used to wonder about it sometimes. Like why we didn't look the same. Why there weren't baby pictures of me. But I didn't care." Henry folded the letter neatly. "You shouldn't have had to care." She looked down. "She cried a lot when she thought I was asleep. I think she was sick again, but she didn't want to scare me. She kept saying things like, just in case, and making me memorize addresses and names." Henry stood. I need to see something. He returned to the attic, this time with more purpose. Within minutes, he unearthed a storage box labeled in thick black marker, Denver, Personal. Inside were old photographs, newspaper clippings, and a few scribbled notes from the years he had all but erased. Near the bottom, he found a small photo tucked into an envelope with no writing, Sarah, smiling beside a younger woman, her arm wrapped protectively around her. In her arms, a baby with bright green eyes. Henry stared at it for a long time. When he came back down, Lily was standing at the window, watching the trees sway in the breeze. You remember her? Lily asked, not turning. I remember everything. I tried not to. Are you mad at her? No, he said. I'm mad at myself. Later that afternoon, Henry made the first call. Not to the police, not yet. He called a private contact, someone he had once trusted with legal affairs before he vanished from that world. It was a risk, and it meant opening a door he'd kept shut for too long. I need someone to discreetly check a death report, he said. Sarah Miller. Possibly deceased within the last 24 hours. I need confirmation, location, and details. Quietly. The contact didn't ask questions. They never did. Hours passed. Lily remained quiet, sometimes exploring the house cautiously, other times asking questions that seemed simple but cut too deep. What do you do all day? Why don't you go outside? Do you have any friends? Henry answered what he could. And when he couldn't, he simply listened. By nightfall, the call came back. A woman matching Sarah Miller's description had been found dead in her apartment, natural causes, likely heart failure. No foul play. No one to claim the body. And no record of a child. Henry hung up without speaking, a cold weight settling in his chest. He sat in the dark for a long time after that, the glow of the fireplace painting shadows across the room. She had come to him because she had no one else. And now, for the first time, he wondered what it would mean if he chose not to let her go. The knock came just after noon the next day. It was not like Lily's knock, hesitant and barely audible. It was firm, official, the kind of knock that came from someone who had knocked on hundreds of doors before and knew exactly how long to wait between each thud. Henry had been watching Lily sketch quietly at the dining table, one of his old notebooks open before her. Her drawings were rough but showed a precision beyond her age. She didn't flinch at the sound, but Henry did. He stood and approached the door with a growing sense of dread, checked the camera feed, and saw a woman in her late 30s standing on the front step. She wore a dark gray coat, clipboard in one hand, a leather satchel hanging from the other shoulder. Her expression was neutral, businesslike, but there was a sharpness in her eyes that told him she missed nothing. Henry opened the door only halfway. Mr. Whitaker? She asked. That's me. Claire Bennett, Denver County Child Services. She raised a badge for less than a second before tucking it back into her coat. I need to speak with you. May I come in? Henry hesitated, then stepped aside. Claire entered briskly, taking in the modern lines of the home with a glance, but her focus landed immediately on the young girl sitting quietly at the table. Lily looked up but did not speak. She had already folded her sketchbook closed and placed her hands in her lap. I received an anonymous call yesterday about a child potentially being held in this home, Claire said calmly, stepping forward but not yet approaching the girl. The caller claimed the child arrived here alone after her mother's death. Is this true? Henry stood between them. She arrived here yesterday morning. Her name is Lily Miller. Her mother, Sarah Miller, passed away recently. I've already confirmed it through private channels. Claire's gaze sharpened. Are you a relative of the child? No, he said, then added, not biologically. But I knew her mother. Years ago. That's not a legal relationship, Mr. Whitaker. I'm aware, he said, already bracing. Claire turned slightly, finally addressing Lily directly. Hi, Lily. I'm Claire. I help make sure kids are safe when something unexpected happens. Can I talk to you for a minute? Lily nodded, but her eyes darted to Henry. He gave her a subtle nod. Claire crouched beside the chair, her tone softening. "Can you tell me how you got here?" "I took the bus," Lily said. "I had money in a jar. I found this house because my mom told me to come if anything happened." "Did your mom tell anyone else where you were going?" Lily shook her head. "She said it had to be a secret." Claire wrote something quickly on her clipboard, then stood. "Mr. Whitaker, I understand this may feel sudden, but I need to take Lily with me until we can determine what's best for her. This isn't about judgment. It's procedure. When a child is found without a legal guardian, our job is to ensure their immediate safety and well-being." Henry didn't move. "She's not going anywhere until I understand exactly what that means." Claire narrowed her eyes. "Are you refusing to comply?" "I'm saying I'm not handing her over until I know she won't be thrown into a system she wasn't meant to be in." Claire took a breath, choosing her words carefully. "Mr. Whitaker, I've been doing this job for over a decade. I've seen what happens when people interfere with the legal process. Children are not puzzles you get to solve privately. If Lily's mother didn't name a legal guardian, then the state of Colorado is responsible for her protection." Henry stepped closer. "Sarah named me." Claire blinked. "Do you have proof of that?" He retrieved a folder from the desk and handed it to her. Inside was a scanned copy of the letter Lily had brought, the old photograph, and a separate document, a last will and testament, unsigned but written in Sarah's handwriting and notarized from a year ago. It clearly stated that, in the event of her death, she wished for Henry Whitaker to assume guardianship of Lily Miller. Claire flipped through the pages. "This isn't a legal custodial document. It's a letter of intent at best." "She had no one else," Henry said, voice low. "No family. No safety net. That little girl has nowhere else to go." Claire looked over at Lily, who was now gripping the edge of the table tightly. There was no panic in her eyes, just the quiet fear of someone who had learned how quickly adults could vanish. "I'm not trying to fight you," Henry added. "I'm trying to give her what her mother wanted. If there's paperwork, I'll file it. If there's a process, I'll follow it. But you don't get to rip her out of here based on an anonymous call. Not while there's a document, not while she's safe, and not while I'm standing here." Claire said nothing for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly, reached into her satchel, and retrieved a form. "Then here's what happens. I'm filing an emergency temporary custody report. That means Lily can remain here for the next 72 hours under your supervision while we begin the formal investigation. During that time, I will conduct a home inspection, background check, and psychological evaluation." Henry nodded. "Fine." Claire turned to Lily and knelt again. "Lily, I'm going to come back in a day or two to check on you. Can you be honest with me when I do?" Lily nodded. Claire stood. "Mr. Whitaker, I'll need you to sign the temporary guardian consent. I'll also need access to her room, your medical records, and any proof of income or criminal history. It's not personal, it's procedure." "Understood." As she packed up her clipboard and documents, Claire's tone softened again. "It's rare," she said quietly, "to see someone like you step forward after so many years. Especially without obligation." "I'm not stepping forward," he said. "I just opened the door." Claire didn't respond. She only nodded and let herself out. After the door shut, Lily remained motionless at the table. Henry sat beside her. "I'm not going to let them take you without a fight," he said. She looked up, and for the first time since arriving, a tear slipped down her cheek. "Promise?" "I promise." The day after Claire Bennett's visit, Henry awoke before sunrise, not from a dream or noise but from something far more unsettling, clarity. He had agreed to let Lily stay, at least temporarily, but his internal world remained a whirlwind of conflicting instincts, logic wrestling with emotion, obligation colliding with decades of isolation. He had spent years keeping people out, convincing himself he had nothing to give and no one worth giving to. And yet here he was, preparing breakfast for a child who'd arrived at his doorstep claiming to belong to a life he had long buried. Lily came downstairs around 7 o'clock, still wearing the same gray hoodie. Her hair was brushed, clumsily, but brushed nonetheless. She didn't ask for help, she didn't seem like the type who ever had. As she sat at the table and picked at a piece of toast, Henry noticed a faint bruise on her left forearm, yellow and fading. He didn't comment on it. Not yet. I want to tell you about her, Lily said suddenly, breaking the silence. Henry looked up from the stove. About your mother? She nodded. But only if you want to know. I do, he said, more sincerely than he expected. She was strong, Lily began. Not just in the way people say to be polite. She worked 2 jobs most weeks. Sometimes she came home with her feet bleeding. But she never complained. Not once. She always said we were a team, that everything she did was for us. Henry brought her a cup of warm milk, and she took it carefully, wrapping her hands around it like it was a shield. She told me stories at night, she continued. Most of them were made up, ones where I was the hero, or where she was a queen who had to protect a magical kingdom. But there were also real stories. Hard ones. She told me she'd made mistakes, that she trusted the wrong people when she was younger. She said she used to know someone named Henry. That he was different. But she never said why he left. Henry sat down across from her, his voice low. I didn't leave. She did. And I never knew why. Lily studied him for a long moment, then opened her notebook. Tucked inside, folded into quarters, was another letter, not like the one Sarah had written for Henry, but one clearly intended for her daughter. The paper was thinner, written in blue ink with occasional smudges that looked like they had been made by tears. Lily passed it to him. She wrote this 3 nights before she died. I wasn't supposed to read it until I was older. But I did. Henry unfolded it with care, scanning quickly. My Lily. If you're reading this, it means I didn't wake up. Please know that I wasn't afraid. I knew something was wrong for a while. I just didn't want to waste time in hospitals when I had you to raise. You gave me everything I never thought I deserved, joy, laughter, purpose. You made me brave. I need you to remember something. If you're ever lost or scared, find Henry Whitaker. He was once someone I loved. He helped me believe the world could be good. I never told him about you because I didn't think I was allowed to ask for that kind of help. I was ashamed. Of how I left, of how much time passed, of how I never said goodbye. But I trust him. If he opens the door, let him. If he closes it, walk away with your head high. You'll survive. You always do. Love. Mom. Henry lowered the paper slowly, the words lingering like a scent that wouldn't fade. For the first time, he understood that Sarah's silence hadn't been indifference, it had been fear. Shame. Pride. She hadn't run from him out of hate. She'd run because she couldn't face the version of herself she thought he'd see. She never stopped believing in you, Lily said. Even when I think she stopped believing in herself. Henry didn't speak. The weight of the letter sat in his chest like stone. Later that morning, Claire returned for the first part of her scheduled evaluation. She arrived precisely at 9 o'clock, clipboard in hand, expression unreadable. Lily was upstairs. Henry let her in and offered coffee, which she declined. I've reviewed your file, Claire began, flipping through pages. Clean criminal record. No history of substance abuse. Significant financial assets. One therapist on record from 21 years ago, discontinued treatment voluntarily. Henry raised an eyebrow. That's thorough. I'm paid to be thorough. She scanned the room, noting the cleanliness, the child-appropriate furniture he had brought in since yesterday, a beanbag chair, a second-hand bookshelf now half filled with classics and picture books. You've made some changes. I had things stored. I brought them down. Claire moved to the window, peered out at the garden. The truth is, Mr. Whitaker, most men in your position would have called the police the moment a child appeared on their doorstep. Especially one with no legal connection to them. You didn't. That matters. But it also raises questions. What kind of questions? Motivation. Emotional stability. Long-term commitment. Are you prepared to raise her? Not for a weekend. Not out of guilt. For years. I don't know, Henry answered honestly. I didn't plan for this. I don't have a roadmap. Claire turned to face him. Children don't need maps. They need constancy. He nodded slowly. I can give her that. Or I can try. I'll be conducting a psychological assessment in the coming days, she said, making another note. And Lily will be interviewed independently. But I'll be honest with you, what you have working in your favor is that she seems stable. That matters more than you think. Isn't that tragic? He asked. That a child's ability to survive trauma is what makes her case easier? Claire's eyes flicked up to meet his. It is. But it's the world we live in. When she left, Lily came down cautiously. Henry was in the library, reviewing legal options. She approached silently. I told the truth, she said. He looked up. To Claire? Lily nodded. But only half. What do you mean? I didn't tell her about the people who came to the house the night before Mom died. The two men. They weren't friends. They argued with her. She told me to hide in the closet. Henry's face darkened. Did they hurt her? I don't think so. But she looked scared. Really scared. More than usual. Henry sat back. Why didn't you tell Claire? Because I don't trust anyone yet. Only you. He felt the words settle somewhere deep, somewhere dangerous. He didn't know what Sarah had gotten herself into. He didn't know if those men had anything to do with her death. But what he did know was this: Lily had withheld information from the social worker because she feared the system more than she feared strangers at her door. And now, the half-truths were beginning to pile up. Late afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of Henry's study, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. Lily sat cross-legged on the oriental rug, playing quietly with a small wooden puzzle, its pieces worn from repeated use. Henry watched her for a while, noting the precision of her fingers, the way she paused and tilted her head when stuck, as if she carried her mother's perseverance. He recognized all too well the look of someone used to figuring things out alone. Claire Bennett's evaluation was still pending, but her questions roved through his thoughts like restless ghosts. Could he commit? Could he be what Lily needed? The doubts surged, but under them lay a deeper certainty: Lily deserved more than temporary kindness. That evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Henry found himself surrounded by files and photos in his den. Legal documents, pictures of Sarah with Lily as an infant, hospital records hinting at Sarah's intermittent illness, the journals Sarah kept, scraps of her thoughts, sketches, lists. Among them was a formal form, supplied anonymously by Sarah some time before she died, authorizing medical decisions to Henry in emergency situations. It wasn't full guardianship, but it was enough to suggest Sarah trusted him with Lily's welfare. Henry picked up the phone again, dialed the number of a local DNA testing clinic. It was late, but the clinic had an emergency arrangement. He arranged for Lily to come first thing in the morning for the test. Lily probably didn't know what DNA implied fully, but Henry intended to explain carefully. The next morning, Lily followed him in silence to the clinic. She held his hand in the waiting room, her grip light but determined. The nurse, kind and softly spoken, explained the procedure. Henry watched Lily flinch slightly when the pinprick needle came, then steady herself, blinking back tears. Henry offered her water and whispered praise, "You did great." Lily nodded, looking at him as though she had expected no less. When the test was done, Henry drove them home through the winding roads above the city, the trees lining the street red and orange in their autumn finery. Lily pressed her forehead against the window glass, tracing shapes in the frost creeping on the pane. Henry stared straight ahead, thumbs tapping the steering wheel with tension. Back home, afternoon light had faded into an early dusk. He made mac and cheese, Lily's favorite, and they ate at the kitchen table. Over the clink of utensils, Lily asked, "Will it change things?" "Perhaps," Henry said. "But it won't change that I want to be here for you." She nodded, eyes round and distant. Then she asked about Sarah's illness, something she'd overheard in the journals. Henry told her what he knew. Sarah had heart trouble, recurring issues doctors never fully diagnosed, episodes of shortness of breath, fatigue. Sometimes she avoided hospitals, she wrote. Lily flushed. "I didn't know," she said. "She said she was fine." Henry made no excuses. "She tried. She shielded you." Lily looked at him. "Did she tell you why she never sent the letter until it was too late?" Henry shook his head. "No. She wrote that she was afraid of asking for help. That she thought she didn't deserve to share her burdens." His voice cracked. "But she trusted you more than you know." Later, when Claire came for the psychological evaluation, Henry offered his files, letters, photos, the documents Sarah had prepared. Claire examined the paper with the omissions and provisos carefully. She asked Henry about his childhood, about regrets, about relationships. Henry spoke of Sarah, of Lily's arrival at his doorstep, of isolation, and the alarm that love could open him to fear. Then Claire asked Lily, in a separate room. Lily was asked about her feelings, loss, fear, guilt. Lily's voice broke when she said she sometimes blamed herself for not seeing that Sarah was worse than she claimed. She confessed the worry that she had to be strong for both of them. Claire nodded. She told Lily she had no blame. "You are 7 years old," Claire said. "It is not your job to protect someone else." When the DNA results came back 2 days later, Henry sat in the den with his phone trembling in his hand. The message scan read, "Not a biological parent." Relief mingled with disappointment in him. His breath came shallow. He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of every expectation Sarah had placed onto him. Lily knocked on the door. She crept inside. "It's okay," Henry said before she spoke. "I got the results." She sat beside him, silence taut. After a long moment, she asked, "So, what do you do now?" He turned to her. "We do what Sarah hoped. We don't walk away. I may not be your father by blood, but that doesn't matter. We're family because I choose it. Because I want to be." Tears that Lily had held back flooded now. She leaned into him, and he wrapped his arm around her, unsure if he was allowed that closeness, but grateful for it. After a while, Lily sat up, wiping her eyes. "I want to know everything. About her. About what she tried to protect me from." Henry nodded. "I'll show you everything I found. All the letters. The photographs. The journals." That evening, he pulled out the box from the attic with all of Sarah's belongings. Lily sat on the floor between him and a stack of dusty books. They found torn pages with Sarah's sketches, lists of bills she couldn't pay, letters never sent, some addressed to her doctor, some to friends, some to Henry. One was a note about 2 men who came to her apartment, that she was being watched, that she didn't trust them, that she hid Lily in the closet during a visit. Another note said she'd been threatened once, late at night, the voice on the phone demanding money, saying she knew she was trying to reach Henry. Lily's hand trembled as she read the note about threats. Henry held her gently. She looked up at him and said, "Did someone kill her?" Henry's heart stopped at the question. He swallowed, meeting her eyes. "I don't know. But we are going to find out." Lily nodded, and they both sat in silence, the weight of possibility heavier than grief but also edged with resolve. The line between truth and safety had shifted. They were no longer only reacting. They would seek answers. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught. But for the first time in years, it felt like Henry had something worth fighting for. Morning light came more suddenly than Henry was ready for. Lily was already awake, wearing pajama bottoms and a sweatshirt, clutching one of Sarah's old sketches, a crude drawing of a house beneath a moon, when Henry found her in the kitchen. The sketch was one Sarah had drawn long ago, a reminder of dreams too big for the small apartment she once had. Lily held it like a talisman. Henry poured 2 mugs of coffee, 1 herbal tea for Lily, and set them on the kitchen table. He studied her quietly, her small hands folded around the mug, her green eyes shadowed with both resolve and lingering fear. The hearing was today. Everything hinged on what a judge thought best, what a judge believed family meant, and whether documents scribbled by a dying mother and testimony from a 7-year-old would carry weight. Henry felt the air constrict, as though the house itself was holding its breath. Claire arrived first. She walked in like she had rehearsed the moment 100 times, notebook in hand. She didn't smile. She patted Lily on the shoulder, looked at Henry. "Your court papers are ready?" she asked. Henry nodded. "Yes. The temporary guardianship form, the estate documents, Sarah's letters. Also, the affidavit from the private investigator I paid to check hospital death records, and the note about those men Sarah feared." Claire's eyes widened, just slightly, but she nodded in approval. "Good. Everything in proper order." They drove together to the Denver District Court building. The large stone blocks of its facade glowed in the late afternoon sun, flags fluttering. Henry parked and walked up the steps with Lily on one side and Claire on the other. He barely felt his feet. Inside, the courtroom smelled of varnished wood and legal authority. Rows of benches, gallery windows with sunlight streaming in, darting across polished floors. Henry and Lily sat in the front row. Claire's lawyer, a woman with soft eyes and a precise manner, sat beside them. Opposing them, Brandon, Henry's nephew, flanked by 2 attorneys. His expression was a mixture of anger and indignation. Henry could tell he felt betrayed, or perhaps betrayed on principle, as though Henry had stolen something that belonged by birthright. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair and a gaze trained to search for the truth, entered. The courtroom rose briefly. Then everyone sat. Brandon's attorney stood first. He laid out the case. Henry lacked blood relation. Some documents were ambiguous. The notarization of Sarah's will was recent but might be contested. Lily had minor inconsistencies in her statements about her past, the night before Sarah's death, the 2 men, those threats, that required further verification. He urged the court to consider the risk to Lily, to avoid potential emotional harm stemming from uncertainty, to consider placing Lily in a foster care system with oversight until everything was clear. Henry's attorney rose next. She spoke of Lily's need for consistency, of the promises Sarah made, of Lily's own fear of the system she'd been taught to distrust. She read portions of Sarah's letters under oath. She presented the investigators' findings, Sarah's death certificate, hospital confirmation, absence of other relatives, absence of anyone stepping forward. She brought up the bruise Lily bore, explained that it was likely from one of the men Sarah feared. She said that Lily had shown emotional resilience, stability in this home, that Henry had made arrangements for her physical and emotional support. That blood was not the only bond that formed a family. They called Lily to the stand. She spoke quietly at first, her voice trembling as she described her mother's final days, the hiding in closets, fear of those men who came at night, the letters her mom left that spoke of hope for Henry to care for her. She expressed that she didn't want to go to one of those homes, where she wouldn't be able to sleep with her own things around her. She looked at Henry and said, "I want to stay with him." Brandon took the stand next. He argued that his inheritance might be at stake. He claimed responsibility was too much for Henry at this stage. He questioned Henry's long absence from society, his health, his ability to endure long nights. One of his attorneys asked if Henry had ever had children, reminding the judge that Lily had no legal or blood tie. Henry rose. His voice shook. "I do not have Lily's blood. But I have Sarah's letters. I have memories. I have the empty box with the photograph she kept. I have the promise she made. And I have Lily sitting here, terrified of losing the only shelter she's ever known. If love counts for anything, I am her guardian. If trust counts for anything, I am her guardian." I made the decision to open the door. I made the decision to stay. The judge listened. She asked a few questions. Mr. Whitaker, do you understand that legal guardianship requires more than promise? Financial support, medical decisions, education, emotional stability, for years. That you've had little recent presence in many of these areas? Yes, Henry answered. I have work to do. But I am capable. He shared the arrangements he made, the therapist he arranged for Lily next week, the school he'd enrolled her in, the pediatrician he had on retainer. He showed bank records sufficient to support her. He showed video recordings of Lily in his home, safe, eating, laughing even. Lily's lawyer spoke, too, a guardian ad litem, praising Henry's commitment, acknowledging Lily's vulnerability but noting that staying with Henry was in her best interest, given the evidence. Claire, seated quietly, nodded at times. She'd prepared the assessment of Henry's home, found it safe, nurturing. She testified that Lily had already formed attachments, that her previous trauma did not make her weak, but made care continuity essential. The courtroom fell silent. The judge reviewed her notes. She asked for one final moment of consideration, then announced she would deliberate and issue her ruling in 2 days. Outside, Henry held Lily's hand. Lily leaned into him, head on his shoulder, trembling, and he held her tight. Brandon's face was impassive on the other side of the courtroom doors, his lawyers whispering together. That night, Henry couldn't sleep. He walked in his mansion's halls, stopped at Sarah's old bedroom, now stripped of its painted walls and small bed, and tucked the photograph and letters into his jacket. He sat in Lily's room, listening to her breathing through the open door. 2 days later, they returned to court. Lily sat next to Henry, gripping his hand. Brandon was there but quiet. The judge entered and called the case, Lily Miller, represented by Henry Whitaker. The judge's voice echoed. The judge recognized that although Henry was not Lily's biological father, the evidence was overwhelming. Sarah's clear intent documented in letters and wills, Lily's own expressed wishes, Henry's financial stability and willingness to take on guardianship, lack of other claimants who could offer equivalent stability, and worst, the danger of tearing Lily from a home that had become her only sanctuary. The court granted legal guardianship to Henry Whitaker. Temporary custody was transformed into permanent status, until Lily reaches adulthood or another legal change. Brandon's objections were acknowledged, but ultimately dismissed, as the judge found them insufficient in light of Lily's best interests. Lily looked up at Henry in that moment. He felt his heart crack open, like a dam giving way. Her small hand curled in his. No more court, Lily whispered. Henry nodded, voice thick. No more court. Outside, in the late afternoon golden glow, Henry and Lily walked out of the courthouse together. Henry carried Lily's sketchbook, Lily carried Sarah's letters tucked close to her chest. They didn't speak much. Words felt too large. Henry looked at Lily. You did it. She smiled shyly. We did it. He realized, walking down the steps, that the greatest risk he had taken was letting Hope Indiana. And that today, Hope had answered. They crossed the plaza, tall buildings around them, and for the first time, he felt part of something bigger than loneliness. He felt, improbably, home. The days following the court's decision passed with an odd sense of calm. Henry no longer felt the same tension pressing against the walls of the house. Claire's visit stopped. The phones went silent. There were no more forms to fill, no more hearings to prepare for. Lily started attending a small private school just 10 minutes from the house, one Henry had carefully selected based on Sarah's old notes about her hopes for Lily's education. The routine, once foreign and fragile, slowly began to settle into something resembling normal life. But calm is rarely permanent. It was a Wednesday morning when the letter arrived. Not by email. Not by courier. Just a plain white envelope slipped through the gate mailbox. Henry found it while walking down the front drive after Lily had gone to school. His name was typed on the front, but there was no return address. Inside was a single page, typed. A woman named Ruth Hastings, claiming to have known Sarah for over 10 years, said she had information Henry deserved to hear about Sarah's final years, things Sarah might have been too ashamed or afraid to say. She offered to meet at a cafe near downtown Denver, signing only her first name and a phone number. Henry stood there for several minutes, letter in hand, wondering if this was another twist from Brandon's camp. But something about the tone was different, measured, human. He called the number that afternoon and arranged to meet the woman the next day. The cafe was quiet when he arrived. Ruth was already seated, her hair a soft silver, skin worn with time but eyes sharp behind round glasses. She greeted him with a polite nod, then folded her hands in front of her. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said. "I'm here because Sarah was my neighbor and my friend. She was also very good at hiding things." Henry leaned forward. "What things?" Ruth looked at him for a long moment. "You knew her when she was young. When she still believed in the good parts of the world. But when she got older, things didn't go the way she thought they would. She worked jobs beneath her, struggled to stay afloat. She was diagnosed with cardiomyopathy about 5 years ago. She started hiding it because she didn't want Lily taken away." Henry's chest tightened. "I knew about the heart issues, but not the diagnosis. She had help now and then," Ruth continued. "From me, from a few others. But she refused to let anyone get close enough to be legally responsible. She was terrified of the system. Terrified that if she died, Lily would vanish into it. That's why she started writing all those letters." Henry nodded slowly. "I've read them." "There's more," Ruth said. She reached into her purse and pulled out a thin folder. Inside were photographs, some of Sarah with Lily, some of Sarah alone, and one that made Henry's jaw tighten. It was of Sarah standing in front of a man, a tall figure in a dark coat, face partially blurred by motion. "That man," Ruth said, tapping the photo, "was around a lot toward the end. She never gave his name. But she was afraid of him. Said he was connected to something she tried to get away from a long time ago." "Brandon?" Henry asked. Ruth shook her head. "No. Someone else. She used to work at a marketing firm in Boulder. Said there was someone there who ran more than just numbers. She left suddenly and changed jobs. Said she'd seen things she shouldn't have, money laundering, shady donations, something involving real estate fronts. She thought she could ignore it, but then years later, that man found her again." Henry felt his stomach twist. "She never told me any of this. She wouldn't. Not even me, until she got really sick. That's when she told me about the box, the one with your letters, the old address, the picture. She said if anything happened, she had to believe that you'd still care. That you'd protect Lily." Henry swallowed hard. "Did you ever see him again?" "The man?" "Once," Ruth said. "A week before she died. He came to the building late at night. I saw them argue from my window." Sarah looked scared. She kept glancing over her shoulder like she expected someone else to be watching. Henry took a breath. "Why didn't you go to the police?" "I asked her if she wanted me to. She said no. She said it would only make things worse. I think she knew she didn't have long and didn't want to stir anything that would outlive her and reach Lily." Henry took the folder from the table. "Can I keep this?" Ruth nodded. "I already made copies." When he returned home, Lily was on the couch, backpack beside her, a half-eaten apple in one hand. She looked up, concerned. "Where were you?" "Meeting someone who knew your mom," he said honestly. "Is that her stuff?" she asked, nodding at the folder. "It's more of her story," he said, sitting beside her. "Things we didn't know." Lily set the apple down. "Like what?" He hesitated. "She was trying to protect you from more than just illness. She had people in her life who scared her. She didn't want them near you." "Is that why she died?" Lily asked quietly. "No," Henry said. "But it might be why she was alone when it happened." They opened the folder together. Lily touched the photograph of her mother standing in front of the man. She didn't recognize him. Neither did Henry. But the image burned into his mind. Later that night, Henry made another call, this time to a contact who owed him a favor from his Wall Street days. "I need you to identify someone from a photo," he said. "It's old. But I have reason to believe he was connected to a fraudulent real estate network in Boulder about 10 years ago." The voice on the other end didn't hesitate. "Send the file." Henry scanned the image and sent it. As he waited for a response, he returned to Lily's room. She was asleep now, breathing evenly, her fingers curled around the edge of the blanket. Henry sat beside her bed, thinking of Sarah, of how many years she must have lived in fear and silence, of how close he had come to never knowing any of it. The call came just after midnight. The voice was clipped, urgent. "We got him. His name is Daniel Hirsch. He was investigated in 2012 for wire fraud and embezzlement through shell real estate companies. Charges dropped due to lack of evidence. But he's known. And dangerous." Henry stared out the window into the dark trees beyond. "Thank you," he said. He hung up and returned to the kitchen, folder in hand. The weight of Sarah's past was finally settling into focus. And if Daniel Hirsch was still out there, still watching, then Lily's future might be in danger too. But this time, she wasn't unprotected. This time, the door had been opened. And Henry Whitaker wasn't going to close it again. The following week brought with it a fragile kind of stillness, like the moment before a storm breaks. Henry knew the pieces were moving, quietly and out of sight. Every instinct from his years in finance, negotiation, and political damage control told him that something was coming. Daniel Hirsch was not the kind of man to simply fade away. Men like that moved beneath the surface until they had something to gain or someone to destroy. Lily, oblivious to the newest developments, had begun to adapt more naturally to life in the house. Her drawings filled the fridge. Her laughter, though rare, echoed through the halls when she watched old animated films curled under a blanket. Henry had taken to reading to her at night from Sarah's favorite books, dog-eared paperbacks with highlighted passages and faint tea stains that somehow made the stories feel sacred. They didn't talk much about Sarah anymore, but the silence between them was not empty. It was filled with understanding. Then came the letter that changed everything. Henry found it tucked inside the bottom drawer of Sarah's old desk, one he'd avoided opening until now. The drawer was locked, but the key had been taped beneath the writing surface, exactly the kind of quiet precaution Sarah would take. Inside, wrapped in tissue and placed beneath a pile of bank statements, was a small notebook bound in green fabric. The first half of the notebook contained handwritten records, lists of payments made to cash-only contractors, detailed phone conversations, notes about conversations with men whose names were abbreviated, DH, TB, MC. And near the end, Sarah had written something that made Henry sit down immediately. February 4th, Lily's adoption threatened. DH knows. Told me he could overturn paperwork if I didn't keep quiet. Not sure how, but he's connected. I'm being watched. He says I owe him. But I owe Lily more. If something happens to me, HW must know. Henry closed the notebook with care, his mind already running ahead. This wasn't just blackmail. This was leverage over Sarah's most precious relationship, her right to keep her daughter. And the implication that Daniel Hirsch had the means, or at least the illusion of influence, to undo that legal foundation meant that he had more reach than they'd realized. That afternoon, Henry met again with the same investigator who had confirmed Sarah's death. A lean man with a face that seemed built for staying unnoticed, he listened silently as Henry explained what he'd found. When Henry handed him the notebook, he whistled low under his breath. "You're not just dealing with old enemies here," the man said. "You're dealing with someone who thinks they still own people." "I need proof," Henry said. "Something solid enough to bring to the authorities. Something that doesn't just bury this man, but buries any threat to Lily's name." "I'll dig," the man said. "But it won't be clean. And it won't be fast." That night, Henry told Lily they were going on a short trip. Just 2 days, he said. We need to visit someone who might have known your mom. Someone who can help us understand a few things. Lily didn't ask many questions. She packed a small bag and carried her sketchpad like it was armor. They drove south, away from Denver, toward Boulder. The town Sarah had once lived in. The town she had run from. They stayed in a modest inn near the city's edge. The next morning, they visited a small art studio nestled in a block of aging buildings. Henry wasn't sure what he was looking for, only that Sarah had mentioned it in the notebook, a place she once taught children's classes under a different name, hoping to escape her past. There, they met a woman named Jeanette, mid-50s, dyed red hair pulled back into a loose braid. She had been one of Sarah's closest acquaintances from those years. At first wary, Jeanette opened up after seeing a picture of Sarah and Lily together. She was brilliant, Jeanette said, offering them tea. But haunted. Always watching her back. She never explained why. Henry nodded. Do you recognize this man? He showed her the blurred photo of Daniel Hirsch from Ruth's folder. Jeanette stiffened. He came by once. Pretended to be from a publishing agency, said he wanted to sponsor local art teachers. But Sarah froze when she saw him. She left that day and never came back. She mentioned he threatened to overturn Lily's adoption. Jeanette looked horrified. He said he had friends in county offices. He wasn't bluffing. I had a friend who worked in family court, said there were whispers about sealed records being unsealed, cases reopened without protocol. All off the books. Did she ever talk about money? She was offered something to keep quiet. Not much, but enough to keep her silent. She turned it down. Said it wasn't worth losing her soul. Back in the car, Henry relayed everything to the investigator by phone. Find out if Hirsch has a link to family court records, he said. Any judge, clerk, anyone who's been on the payroll. The man replied grimly, already on it. But you're poking the beast now, Henry. He'll notice. And he did. 2 nights later, someone tried to break into Henry's home. The security system caught everything, a man in dark clothing attempting to bypass the gate, testing the perimeter. No damage was done, no entry made, but the message was clear. Henry alerted the authorities, filed a report, and doubled the system's settings. Then he called Claire. She came immediately, concerned but calm. After hearing everything, she asked to see the notebook. This changes things, she said. If someone threatened Sarah's legal rights, and now is threatening Lily's safety, we're looking at a criminal conspiracy. Will the court do anything retroactively? Henry asked. Claire paused. Not unless we bring charges. But if we can connect Hirsch to falsified records, especially threats involving a child, we could open a whole investigation. Lily sat nearby, hugging her knees. She didn't interrupt. When Claire left, she turned to Henry and asked, was he trying to take me? I don't think he wanted you, Henry said. I think he wanted silence. Your mother knew something. Now he thinks I do too. Lily stared out the window. I wish I could ask her what to do. Henry's voice was firm. She already told you. In every letter, every sketch, every whispered story. She told you to fight. The next morning, Henry received a message from the investigator. Meet me. I have what you need. They met at a quiet diner off the interstate. The man handed Henry a flash drive and several printed documents. Emails, he said. Between Hirsch and a former court clerk. Bribes. Promises. Mentions of Sarah. And, most importantly, talk of sealing Lily's adoption records under an alias to make them easier to reverse. But Sarah caught on. That's why Hirsch started threatening her. Henry read the pages slowly. This was it. The final puzzle piece. As he drove home that night, the city lights blinking through the fog, Henry felt something shift inside him, not fear, not even anger. Just certainty. Sarah had fought in silence. Now it was his turn to fight out loud. Because the pieces were no longer scattered. They were aligned. And Henry finally saw the shape of the battle ahead. The drive back to the courthouse felt longer than any trip Henry had taken in the past 20 years. Not because of distance, but because of what the folder on the passenger seat represented. Inside were the documents recovered by his investigator, the email exchanges, bank transfer confirmations, internal memos that had no business being outside sealed court files. More damning than any of it was a transcript of a recorded phone call made just 3 days before Sarah's death, in which Daniel Hirsch discussed undoing a mistake tied to an adoption and reminding her who holds the pen. Henry had taken the recording straight to Claire. Her response had been immediate. A new petition was drafted. An emergency court hearing was requested. Charges were being discussed behind closed doors. This wasn't just about a custody battle anymore, it was about corruption, coercion, and a dead woman whose only crime had been trying to protect her daughter. But this hearing wasn't about criminal charges yet. Not officially. It was about the safety of the child and the legitimacy of the threats made against her family. A judge had granted an emergency audience after the submission of the documents. And now Henry, for the second time in weeks, found himself walking through courthouse doors, not as a bystander, not as a man dragged in by circumstance, but as someone who had chosen to fight. Lily walked beside him in silence. She held his hand, and though her fingers were small, her grip had the kind of strength that came from knowing you didn't have the option to fall apart. Brandon was already there when they arrived. This time, he didn't look smug. He looked nervous. Henry was ushered into the chamber. Lily remained in the adjoining room with a court officer. Claire stood at his side. The judge was the same woman from the guardianship hearing. She acknowledged him with a glance, but her focus was on the folder Claire placed on her bench. "I have reviewed the evidence submitted by Ms. Bennett and Mr. Whitaker," the judge began. "The contents of this file raise serious questions regarding the adoption and custody records of the minor child in question, Lily Miller. Mr. Whitaker, do you affirm that all documents submitted to this court are authentic to the best of your knowledge?" "I do," Henry said. "And that the contents were not obtained illegally?" "They were collected by a licensed private investigator, all from publicly accessible or privately archived communications, provided by a third party who once worked with Mr. Hirsch." The judge nodded. She turned to Claire. "And your assessment?" "These documents prove that Mr. Hirsch, under the guise of a benefactor or legal advisor, attempted to exert unlawful influence over Sarah Miller's adoption process years after its legal finalization. Furthermore, they show intent to intimidate and extort. It is my recommendation that these findings be forwarded immediately to the district attorney." The judge folded her hands. "And what role does Mr. Brandon Whitaker have in this?" Claire paused. "We believe he acted independently of Hirsch. There is no direct evidence connecting him to the extortion. However, we believe his involvement in past attempts to limit communication between Henry Whitaker and Sarah Miller should be formally questioned, given the pattern of obstruction." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Brandon Whitaker, do you wish to respond?" Brandon stood, hands clenched at his sides. "Your Honor, I didn't know about the man. I swear it. I never met Hirsch. I only wanted what was fair. My uncle cut off the entire family, and now he reappears to claim some moral victory? That little girl isn't his." The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Whitaker, this hearing is not about biology. It is about responsibility. The law recognizes legitimacy through legal guardianship, not bloodline. The question is no longer whether Henry Whitaker is fit to care for the child. That has been established. The question is whether Sarah Miller was threatened and whether the child is still in danger." The courtroom fell silent. Then Henry spoke. "Your Honor, Sarah Miller was a woman who lived with more courage than most people show in a lifetime. She knew her life was short, and she used it to love a child who wasn't born of her but was completely hers. She never asked for help, never took money she didn't earn, and she never stopped believing that love could outlast fear. When she couldn't protect Lily anymore, she sent her to me, not because I'm a hero, but because I once promised I would be when it mattered. I failed her once. I won't fail her again. The judge stared at him for a long time. Then she opened the folder again. I'm ordering a full criminal investigation into the allegations presented. In the meantime, I am issuing a protective injunction against any party connected to Daniel Hirsch, barring them from contact with Lily Miller or Mr. Henry Whitaker. All existing adoption records will be sealed under emergency order and moved into the protected custody of this court. Brandon looked stunned. As for Mr. Brandon Whitaker, the judge continued, you are ordered to cease all attempts at contact or interference with the child's life until the investigation concludes. If further evidence links you to any part of the obstruction against Sarah Miller or Henry Whitaker, criminal charges may follow. She then turned to Henry. This court recognizes that you have gone to extraordinary lengths to protect this child, and in doing so, uncovered a serious breach in our legal system. This is not over, but I want you to know, you have honored her mother's trust. Henry gave a small nod. Thank you, Your Honor. As the hearing closed, Claire leaned toward him and whispered, you just burned a man without ever raising your voice. They walked out of the courtroom into the late morning light. Henry found Lily in the hallway, where she sat with her legs swinging from the bench. She looked up at him, uncertain. Well, she asked. He knelt in front of her. We're safe for now. Hirsch can't touch you. And your mom's voice finally reached someone. Lily wrapped her arms around his neck. I knew you'd do it. He closed his eyes briefly, holding her close. We're not done, he said. But we're winning. They drove home in near silence, exhausted but somehow lighter. That night, Lily asked to sleep in the guest room next to Henry's, not her own. He said yes. After she fell asleep, Henry sat in the den, staring at the photo of Sarah tucked into the corner of the bookshelf. He whispered a single sentence to the empty room. I kept the door open. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like she had walked through it. 2 weeks after the emergency court session, the dust had begun to settle. Or at least, it pretended to. The protective injunction was holding. The district attorney's office had formally opened a preliminary investigation into Daniel Hirsch, including his financial connections to several clerks and legal aides linked to old adoption records. Henry had turned over all evidence to Claire, who remained in close contact with the legal authorities. No more men had shown up at the gate. No more late-night break-ins or surveillance. Still, Henry did not relax. There was a restlessness in him now, something he couldn't quite name. Perhaps it was the slow process of learning to live with a child who had lost everything. Or perhaps it was something simpler, some primal instinct that told him the past didn't die just because a judge had signed a piece of paper. He watched Lily from a distance more often now, not out of suspicion, but concern. She had resumed her routine, school, homework, sketching in her notebook, but he noticed that her drawings had shifted. Less whimsical now. More focused. Faces, mostly. Unsmiling. Sometimes faceless. And occasionally, she drew a man in a coat, always in the distance, never detailed. Henry never asked who he was. One night, as a storm rolled quietly over the Denver hills, Henry received a phone call he did not expect. Brandon. He stared at the caller ID for several seconds before answering. Henry, Brandon said. No preamble. No tension in his voice. Just exhaustion. I need to talk. Henry kept his voice neutral. About what? Not over the phone. Please. There was a pause. Henry could have refused. He should have. But something in Brandon's tone gave him pause, not guilt, but the hint of someone who had finally hit the end of their rope. They agreed to meet the next afternoon at a small public park near the city courthouse. Neutral ground. The next day, Henry parked under the shade of an old maple tree and waited. Brandon arrived late. He looked different, his suit was wrinkled, his collar open, his eyes bloodshot. He carried no briefcase, no legal pads, no smugness. He sat on the bench beside Henry, staring out at the empty swing set in silence. You're not being followed, Henry said. Brandon gave a bitter laugh. I'd have no way of knowing anymore. Henry waited. Brandon sighed. You think I did it for money? You fought for guardianship of a child you never met. Lied about Sarah's condition. Brought in lawyers to challenge a dying woman's wishes. You tell me what that looks like. I thought she was manipulating you. Henry turned. Sarah? Brandon nodded. Not just her. The situation. I thought someone, anyone, would come out of the woodwork and take advantage. I thought, if you got attached again, if you opened that part of yourself, we'd lose everything. Henry narrowed his eyes. We? Brandon leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I grew up watching you build an empire. Then one day you vanished. No explanations. You left me to deal with everything. Clients, rumors, broken ties. You cut off the family. We didn't know if you were alive or dead. When I heard you were back and bringing a child into your life, I assumed it was some scheme. Someone found you vulnerable and latched on. She was a child, Brandon. She was a symbol, he snapped. A symbol that everything I had to carry alone for 20 years meant nothing. Henry's voice was like stone. You're angry because I made peace with my life while you still live inside its echo. Brandon's jaw clenched, but he didn't deny it. You walked away, Henry. I didn't have that luxury. You had choices. You chose bitterness. I chose survival. Henry stood, ready to walk away. But then Brandon said something that stopped him cold. I have something you need. Henry turned back. Brandon pulled out a flash drive from his coat pocket. You're not the only one who's been gathering evidence. I didn't know how deep it went until I got a call, from someone who used to work with Hirsch. They said if I didn't back off the guardianship case, they'd release information about the firm. About a deal you made back in 1996. I never. I know, Brandon said quickly. I checked. There's nothing. They were bluffing. But it worked. I got scared. I let them pull me in. And now? Brandon looked up at him, eyes clearer than before. Now I know they killed her, Henry. Maybe not directly. But they made her run. Made her hide. Made her sick in ways no hospital could diagnose. And I helped by chasing ghosts. Henry took the flash drive. Why now? He asked. Brandon's shoulders dropped. Because Lily's face haunted me. In court. In the hall. I saw Sarah in her eyes. I realized I didn't want to be the reason she learned to hate people. Henry said nothing for a long time. Finally, he nodded once. If this is a beginning, don't expect applause. Don't expect forgiveness overnight. I don't want applause, Brandon said. Just, maybe tell Lily I'm not the villain I almost became. Henry walked away, the flash drive burning in his pocket. At home, he waited until Lily was asleep before opening the files. Dozens of documents. Internal memos. Redirected funds. A list of names, some redacted, some not, all tied to shell companies Hirsch used. One name stood out. A judge. Retired. The same judge who had overseen Sarah's original adoption paperwork. It was enough. Henry called Claire immediately. The next morning, Claire confirmed it. The judge had resigned 2 years early, under undisclosed circumstances. No charges were filed, but there had been rumors. Whispers. Now, with this evidence, things were different. We'll take it to the DA, she said. If we time it right, it'll be the front page by next week. Henry agreed. Make it loud. That evening, Lily found Henry in the library, staring at a framed picture of Sarah that now sat beside the fireplace. She sat beside him, pulling her knees up to the armchair. Were you close with Brandon? She asked. Once, Henry said. We lost each other a long time ago. Is it forever? He looked at her, surprised. "What do you mean?" She shrugged. "People say time fixes things. But it doesn't. People do." Henry leaned back, considering her words. He made a mistake. A big one. But he also tried to fix it. Then maybe he's worth keeping. Henry didn't respond, but he didn't disagree either. That night, the house felt different. Not lighter, exactly. But less haunted. Less heavy. Somewhere deep in the walls, the past had shifted. And the man who once built them to keep everything out now found himself wondering what it would mean to leave the door cracked open, for good. Autumn had nearly given way to winter. The trees that had once surrounded Henry's home in fiery shades of red and gold now stood mostly bare, their branches reaching like skeletal hands toward the overcast sky. The air had a quiet sharpness to it, and the nights arrived earlier with every passing day. But inside the house, something had changed, subtly, steadily, and irreversibly. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, Henry's home felt lived in. Lily's presence had reshaped the rhythm of the place. The once silent hallways now echoed with the soft thuds of her hurried footsteps when she ran to answer the front door. The kitchen counter was no longer spotless. Crumbs from peanut butter toast and streaks of jelly marked mornings that always started with messy hair and sleepy eyes. Henry had found himself learning to make pancakes, learning the names of Lily's classmates, learning how to listen again. Her laughter had returned too, cautiously at first, then more freely. Not the boisterous kind that exploded without warning, but the soft, thoughtful kind that seemed to arrive when she was caught off guard by joy. She often curled up in the large armchair near the fireplace, drawing in her sketchbook while Henry read his newspaper beside her. The radio played softly in the background, sometimes music, sometimes the voice of an old jazz DJ whose voice felt like an old friend. Henry had moved Sarah's journals and letters into a locked cabinet in his study. Not out of secrecy, but preservation. Some nights, he would open one, read a few passages, and then close it again, always overwhelmed by how her voice still seemed to echo through the pages. Lily would sometimes ask him to read parts out loud, not the sad parts, she would say, just the ones where her mother had smiled while writing. Claire still visited occasionally. She had transitioned from social worker to family friend, stopping by with bags of groceries she claimed were extras or books she thought Lily might enjoy. Her presence no longer carried the formal authority of the state. Now, it carried warmth. On one Saturday morning, Claire arrived with something unexpected, an old wooden box with brass hinges. This was in county storage, she explained. Sarah had submitted it as part of her request to finalize Lily's adoption. "It's yours now." Lily opened it carefully, eyes wide. Inside were tiny things, an old pacifier, the first drawing Lily had made at preschool, a hospital bracelet, a faded photo of Sarah holding a newborn in a sunlit room. Lily pressed it to her chest and didn't speak for several minutes. Claire gave Henry a look, gentle, but serious. "She's still healing." "You both are." Henry nodded. Later that evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Henry stood alone in the kitchen, staring out the window at the moonlit lawn. The swing set he had built weeks ago now stood in full view. It had taken him 3 hours and a video tutorial to assemble it, and even then, he'd needed Claire's help with the final bolts. But Lily loved it. It was the first thing she ran to every morning before school. His phone buzzed. It was Brandon. The message was short. "They're opening a formal investigation into Hirsch. Your evidence made it happen. Wanted you to know." Henry didn't reply. Not yet. But he saved the message. Sunday came with clear skies and the scent of pine in the cold morning air. Henry cooked breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, while Lily colored at the kitchen table. She had started creating her own little comic book, a story about a girl who could talk to trees. She asked Henry questions about plot, about character names. He offered suggestions, though most of them were gently rejected. After breakfast, Lily disappeared into her room. She re-emerged a few hours later, wearing a clean dress and clutching something behind her back. "I made something," she said, cheeks slightly flushed. "What is it?" Henry asked. She revealed a drawing, one of her most detailed yet. It was of their house, but different. Colorful. Lively. The windows glowed with yellow light. A figure stood at the door, smiling. Another smaller figure, clearly Lily, stood beside him. Written in bold letters at the top was a title, "My New Home." Henry stared at it longer than he meant to. "You like it?" Lily asked. He cleared his throat. "Very much. I want to hang it somewhere important." He thought for a moment, then nodded. "Come with me." They walked to the entryway. The front hall had always been bare, just white walls, clean wood, and silence. Henry retrieved a frame from the hall closet, one that had never held a picture. Together, they placed the drawing inside and hung it on the wall beside the door. "There," Lily said, stepping back. "Now people will see it when they come in." Henry knelt beside her. "It's beautiful." She took his hand. "It's true." The next day, something unexpected happened. Lily asked if they could visit the cemetery where Sarah was buried. Henry hesitated. He hadn't gone himself, not since the day after the funeral, when he'd stood beneath gray skies and said nothing. But he agreed. They drove in silence, Lily holding a bouquet of small purple flowers she'd picked from the backyard. The cemetery was quiet, rows of markers stretching under leafless trees. Sarah's grave was near the edge, beneath a tall oak whose branches bowed in the breeze. Lily knelt and placed the flowers carefully. "She would have liked these," she said. Henry remained standing behind her. "She's not mad at you," Lily added after a long pause. "In case you were wondering." He looked down at her. "How do you know?" "She told me." "Not with words." "But I know." Henry exhaled. "I'm still mad at myself." "She said you would be." He looked at the stone. No last message carved beneath her name. No inscription. Just Sarah Miller. Loving mother. Brave heart. He stepped forward and placed a folded page beside the flowers. A letter he had written days earlier but hadn't been brave enough to leave until now. As they walked back to the car, Lily reached for his hand. "Do you think she'd be proud of us?" He didn't answer immediately. But as he looked at her, her steady steps, her clear gaze, he felt something loosen inside him. "I think she already was." Back home, Lily spent the rest of the afternoon decorating the hallway with paper stars. She claimed they would bring good luck for the coming winter. Henry let her tape them wherever she wanted, above the door, along the banister, even on the backs of chairs. That evening, as they ate soup together on the couch, she leaned against him and said, "This feels like what home is supposed to be." And for once, Henry didn't feel the need to speak. He simply let the silence hold them both. Because sometimes, silence doesn't mean emptiness. Sometimes, it means peace. Snow came early that year. It began as a whisper in the air, barely perceptible, then grew into a slow and steady fall that blanketed the hills above Denver in quiet white. Henry stood by the tall front window, watching the flakes drift against the glass like tiny, silent visitors. The lawn, the drive, the old oak tree that leaned toward the gate, they were all soft and shapeless now, erased by winter's hush. Behind him, laughter echoed from the hallway. Lily was sliding across the polished wood floors in mismatched socks, a wool hat tugged low over her ears, even though she was still indoors. Her cheeks were flushed, her breath quickened with joy. Henry didn't stop her. He let the rhythm of her steps replace the stillness that had once ruled the house. The drawing she had made, the one titled, "My New Home," remained framed near the entrance. Guests noticed it as soon as they arrived. It had become more than art, it was a declaration. It said, "This is where something ended, and something else began." Christmas was approaching. Not the commercial kind, but the quiet kind, the kind with late-night hot cocoa, snow angels in the yard, and books read by firelight. Henry had never celebrated holidays after withdrawing from the world, but now, he found himself stringing lights along the porch and buying a small tree with branches slightly lopsided. He let Lily decorate it entirely on her own. She placed the star last. "I know it's crooked," she said, stepping back with a smile, "but so was Mom's." Henry chuckled. "Then it's perfect." Brandon had written again. Another short message. This time, he enclosed a newspaper clipping. DA opens formal corruption case against real estate financier Daniel Hirsch. Evidence of systemic interference in adoption records emerges. Brandon's note read only, "She mattered." "You made sure of that?" Henry had not responded yet. Maybe he would. Maybe not. One afternoon, as the snow continued to fall, Lily disappeared into her room for nearly 2 hours. When she emerged, she was carrying a small wrapped box, covered in blue tissue and a ribbon that looked suspiciously like a shoelace. "It's not Christmas yet," she said, "but I want to give it to you now." Henry accepted it with careful hands. Inside was a drawing, more refined than her earlier sketches. It was of the house again, but viewed from outside, the front door wide open. In the doorway stood a man and a girl, looking outward toward the street, toward the world beyond the gate. On the corner of the drawing, written in Sarah's handwriting, copied from one of her old letters, were the words, "He always kept the door shut." Until someone knocked. Henry stared at it for a long time. "Do you like it?" Lily asked. "I love it," he replied, his voice barely audible. "I want to hang it above the door," she said. "So everyone knows they can come in." He framed it that night. No hesitation. No delay. The next morning, it hung above the main entrance, just beneath the brass light fixture that had never been turned on until Lily moved in. Winter deepened. Weeks passed. Claire visited on New Year's Eve. She brought baked goods and a small calendar with hand-drawn flowers. She joined them for dinner, and afterward, the three of them sat by the fire, talking softly as the wind howled outside. Claire had become more than a caseworker. She was part of their strange little family now, quietly, steadily, without labels. "You've done more than anyone expected," she said to Henry, sipping her tea. He shrugged. "I opened a door." "No," she replied. "You built a life." Henry didn't correct her. After midnight, after Claire had gone and Lily had fallen asleep under a blanket with a book still open on her chest, Henry walked the halls of his home. He stopped at the door to Lily's room, listened to her breathing. Then, quietly, he unlocked the front door, not just the bolt, but the deadlock. He let it remain that way, unlocked for the first time in nearly 20 years. He stood there for several minutes, just watching the snow fall beyond the threshold. No fear. No hesitation. The wind pushed lightly against the door, but he didn't close it. Behind him, footsteps. Lily appeared at the edge of the hallway, rubbing her eyes. "You're up," she whispered. "So are you." "What are you doing?" He stepped aside. "Want to see?" She walked to the open doorway and stood beside him. Together, they looked out into the silent white yard, where the snow had blanketed every sound, every trace of the past. "Feels different," she said. "It is," he replied. Then she smiled and pointed to the snow-covered steps. "Let's leave footprints." He turned to her. "Now?" "Why not?" They stepped outside, barefoot in the snow just for a moment. Laughing. Shivering. Leaving marks on the untouched surface. When they returned inside, breathless and red-faced, the warmth of the house wrapped around them like a promise. That night, before Lily returned to her room, she stopped by Henry's door and placed something at the base. He didn't look right away. He waited until he heard her bedroom door click shut. It was another drawing. A simple one. A door. Half open. Light streaming out. Above it, in Lily's handwriting, "Thank you for letting me knock." Henry framed that one too. And this time, he didn't place it on a wall. He hung it on the door itself. Not as a memory. But as an invitation. because some doors are not meant to be locked. Some hearts are not meant to stay closed. And sometimes, all it takes is a knock.